She got the same symptoms. She had the same cold that he got. So they got invaded there.
Well, Julie and Dylan, and a whole bunch of people like that.
Yeah.
And my wife got it.
So you're the
It's
test.
a trickle thing, so I'm the guinea pig, so.
So at least today, quick one, two before we start the responses here.
So all agreements that we had with anybody else. Business session. Did it get transferred? But did it, is there a letter that states it?
It's in this legislation. It's actually kind of good.
So you don't need one
We don't need to redo
individual.
everything. So every piece of property, every legal, every agreement.
So we're the same.
Every agreement that had to do with.
Right.
All right, cool. That's what I thought, something.
Yeah, no, it was a blanket kind of thing. And that was the idea of. Not even remarkable. When we became town and in the legislation, we had the section where any agreements and any land and all that was involved with Cumberland that we then took it over. That was part of the legislation as a blanket thing. No, I'm just saying that, and it was, that's what the lawyers and everybody said, that it was, we didn't have to create new deeds, for example, we didn't make a new deed in the school, we didn't make a new deed. And we didn't make a new agreement with John.
Any existing deed.
Yeah, so like we weren't standing, all it did was, we didn't have to redo it, we just.
Okay.
We need.
I wanted to make sure.
It's 6 o'clock.
Oh, sorry.
That clock.
My watch, I can't wear it because it keeps calling 911. If anybody's had that problem with an Apple Watch and you know how to fix it?
Maybe it's right, 37.
It did it while I was driving down the road, called the film, and they called Yarmouth at 10:30 at night while I was watching television. So that's when I put it away.
That makes it problem.
Yeah, so it's not good. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Selectmen from Sugar Island to order. And we have a new attendee, and I'm going to turn it over to Justin to explain who the new attendee is.
Okay, so we're gonna try this, we won't know until tomorrow whether it works, but that thing on the table there is called an owl. It detects where a voice is coming from and moves the camera to try to find the person that's speaking, does that automatically. That right now is being broadcast on Zoom and on the town's new YouTube page live. So anybody at home, in theory, will be able to listen to tonight's meetings. We're gonna test it for a few things. We've tried it in the office and it works fine. I'm curious about the echo in this room, whether it's gonna be understandable at home. We'll find out tomorrow, trying it out tonight. So bear with us.
And part of that will be, we need to have people go to a certain location to
That's
speak.
correct.
And can you explain?
So if you're looking to make a public comment, please go up to basically the other side of the table there by Carol White, because this thing can't see everybody, and it needs to be able to see your face and everything. So please get up, sort of queue over there against that wall and come up to the end of this table over here. Make your remarks and then go back to your.
So the idea would be that if you want to speak, the first person goes over there, speaks, and then people can line up behind them. That will also make it more fair. When people are raising their hands, sometimes it's hard to know who raised their hand first. So this way you'll be in order. Also, as a way to try to streamline some of our meetings, we want to hear from everybody. But if somebody has had the same comment that you want to make, I would appreciate if you got up there and said, I really feel this way. It's the same thing so-and-so said. Don't just sit in your seat because we won't know what you think, but you don't have to go and explain it again. So we're gonna try that. We're trying a few things to see how they'll work, and hopefully they will. All right, so the next item on the agenda is public comments for items not on the agenda. Now, there were two agendas that were out floating around, so just to let everybody know that on the final agenda, 21 dash 200 is on the final agenda, which is to discuss the transfer station. So if you have questions about the transfer station, we will be talking about that as part of the agenda. So are there any comments that anyone would like to make? Chris Logan.
Hello.
Yes. And if you'd identify yourself, just because we're trying to figure out how the owl works.
Sure. So I'll be your guinea pig.
Yeah, right there.
I am Christopher Loader. Can the owl see me?
Yeah, can see that, yes.
Okay,
Should be.
great. I want to thank you for your time. I suspect that this is going to come up on another meeting, which I may not be able to attend for a variety of reasons. But I wanted to encourage the board and the town to demonstrate some leadership on the subject of compliance with 911 protocols regarding street signage and numbering on Sugar Island. I know there's been lively discussion on the island about the presence and now removal of signs. The removal, it's actually spelled removal, of signs is theft. And allowing theft of town property is an unacceptable precedent to establish. The removal or the non-existence of street signs is potentially discriminatory. It intentionally puts the person from away at a disadvantage to those who know their way around. This form of discrimination appears acceptable to some, but it is not legally acceptable, nor does it reflect the values of this community. I will tell you that I love a good street sign. Anyone who's driven past my house knows that there's a Sasquatch there. I put up the danger alligators sign at the golf course a couple of years ago, so I'm guilty as charged. But there's a difference between good sport and intentionally causing harm. The taking of these street signs is intentional. It was done to harm those who do not know their way around the island, and it is not okay. It says, we don't want people from away to be here, so go away. I personally recognize the people in this room that this may or may not apply to them, and this is not personal in any nature. This has to do with the reflection of who we are to the outside world. But this is not the real issue. The real issue has to do with the purpose of the street signs around 911 protocols. A fire can double in size every 30 seconds. In 3 minutes, a small fire can consume a room. For me, assuming I am awake, it takes me 2 minutes to get to the station. It takes me another 2 minutes to get dressed, to get on the truck. It takes another 3 to 6 minutes to get to your location. That is 7 to 10 minutes. That's 2 rooms. That's 2 rooms, assuming everything is going correct. I have personally driven up, turned around, and driven back to find another street with someone that was sitting beside me that was from the island. There are 80 different roads on this island. 80. With the exception of Donna, I doubt anyone could name all 80 roads and put them on the street, on a map. All right. When my father was breathless, pulseless, blue, and dead on our studio floor, when I called 911, my expectation was that the right people with the right equipment would get there in the least amount of time. Thankfully, I live on South Road at the corner of Littlefield Road, next to the Commons, where more than one call has gone out since I've been here. Now, that took 5 minutes, and I can assure you that those 5 minutes were pretty long. Thankfully, we were busy delivering CPR, and he made a recovery. But I can imagine that if that had not turned out that way, and that the street signs were mixed up, and that as of this last weekend, we had a non-island resident filling in for emergency services. Someone who was from away, someone from Portland was here. And it was their responsibility to have the charge of emergency medical services for the people of this island. So if he didn't get there in time, and we allowed for this, that's on us. So I just want to, I need you all to hear that. It does make a difference. It's not a joke. I am not laughing on my way to the scene. I am thinking, and I have been to some houses here, and I can assure you that every one of us is going to dial 911, and they're going to mean it in our lifetime. If not for ourselves, for someone else. And those seconds count. And on my way to a call, I'm actually thinking, I hope I get there in time, and I hope we can make a difference. Let's take it seriously, and let's lead in our community and explain why the signs are going to be there, and let's make them look beautiful. But let's do it right. Thank you.
When we talk about the, later in the agenda, under other business, which we're now going to be considering what's on the next agenda, I think might be an appropriate time for us to talk about what future action we might want to take on the subject, whether we have a workshop on it or something. So, thank you for bringing that up. Is there,
Donna, can I add, you were exemplary in your moderation on Facebook. And I think everyone in this room needs to acknowledge that you did an outstanding job at listening, probing with questions, and being a fair and equitable leader to the people of Suffolk. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I guess I just want to say one quick thing. My biggest concern about this is not about the signs or whatever. It is about the disregard for taking responsibility for doing something like stealing signs and that kind of thing. And sometimes if somebody wants to have a conversation with me, I'd be happy to tell you the story. I'm not going to take the time now about something that changed my life and taught me how to take responsibility. And it was something that happened on this island, and 30 people stepped up and did the right thing and they didn't have to. So, but I'm not going to get into it today. But I do think that we'll get into other business when we talk about what we want to do. Anyone else have anything that isn't on the agenda? Live.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. I don't have prepared statements. I can say that I can see that signage is something that has a really appropriate place here on the island. I would just say I'd like to see something that is more creative, less looking like urban street signs. And I think that having lived here year-round now, I can see that some of the signs aren't really necessary except in the summer. And to me, it just seems like I don't need to be told more of what to do. So I'd like to see the signage at a minimum, but also to see if some arrangement can be made that is involving community members to take a look at what would be a good way to have signs, but have it be really just more appropriate for Shabbat. So I have to say thank you very much.
Anyone else? Sam.
Hi, I'm Sandra Burkett. I also want to thank you for your time and listening. And I appreciate both what Christopher and Eliza had to add. I think we do know who we are. We do. And I think the people from away, for the most part, the large majority think that we are kind and generous hosts and hostesses. I don't think there's an issue of our reputation with the signs. I do agree that it was shocking to all of a sudden see day glow signs that we have never seen ever before. And I do agree something like locally made wooden signs, more like a state park, hopefully would be better received and respected than something that doesn't seem like it belongs. I do agree with Christopher, there should be signage for emergency. People should know where the beaches are if they need to go there, but I think we could do a better job and maybe have someone on the island make them. That would be my suggestion, to kind of try and appease everyone. Thank you.
Anyone else have something that's not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, let's go on to the town administrator's report.
The crew and I went to Cumberland to look at the truck that we've been discussing with you folks. It is smaller than the one we're replacing. They had good things to say about it. I think at this point, I think it'll be something to discuss probably on your next agenda about whether you want to move forward with that or whether you want to go in a different direction. The inventory for anything right now is small, just like we're noticing with everything. So we're kind of at the whim of, to some extent, about what we can get our hands on and short time frame we have to get it outfitted and rigged up for like winter, which doesn't seem like it's coming. So I'll have more information on it for you for your next meeting. As some may have seen, the chip sealing chips were delivered over the last 3 days. They're all done delivering that for now. The last, I got what did you say today? Changed the date. It's looking like right now the week of August 23rd is today that they will be able to start doing the work. As I said before, the cleanup weekend is scheduled for August 7th, 8th. I have requested, and they're looking into whether we can get 2 additional dumpsters for that. We filled up very quickly last time we did it. And just the amount and the volume of waste that we're going through on a regular basis up at the transfer station is significantly higher, so I would assume we'll get the same issue here. As I said in the memo, the plan is to have people, if they're going to bring lobster traps, we'll set them in the brush dump, and the town crew over the winter when we're not so busy will slowly crush them and put them in, and so we don't fill up all the cans on that weekend, just lobster traps. The other thing I just wanted to bring up real quickly was that keep in mind that if you want to set a referendum, we need 60 days advance notice. So right now we'll be looking at sometime in September. There are a few items that may have to do that, whether there's I know there's, as Michael will talk about, there's the potential for a broadband proposal that would have to be put out. If that's the case, that there's also most likely going to be an election for a school committee member. I just want to make sure that's on your radar screen before whatever kind of action.
I just have a question. Would that be a special town meeting or would it be?
That would be up to you how you want to.
But the time schedule is the same, 60 days, whether it's a referendum.
The
or-
special election is shorter, it's only 30 days. But if there's a town meeting action type of thing.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Anybody on the board have any questions of the town administrator? Mark,
At our next meeting, will you have a recommendation for one of these trucks along with a recommendation of how to fund it?
Yes, I'm currently working through funding options now with our bank and with others to see what the best option is to be for.
Okay. And I'm not gonna ask about the transfer station because we're gonna talk about
Right.
that on the agenda. With the road paving that little section of the lower part of the schoolhouse road to see if you can shim it up or should shim it up before the chip seal?
Yes, I spoke to Doug about that, and that was his recommendation too.
Thank you very much.
I was wondering about the paving, if the letters were sent out to the neighbors.
Yes, those went out Monday, right?
And I see one of the neighbors, you got it. Thank you. And thank you guys for doing that.
We would have sent them out a little bit earlier, but we didn't really know. We just kind of said, oh, we're coming out on Monday, so we tried to get it.
Anyone else on the board, Jen?
Justin, just to bring me up to speed, the reason that we need a new truck, was
Right.
did it have something to do with like licensing or
No, the number 6 truck, the big white one that you probably used to see him driving around, when the crew was removing some of his winter gear and doing some work on it in the spring, we were taking the plows off and stuff. And when they moved some of that, they noticed that there was a crack in the frame, so we shipped it across. And the determination was made that it's only worth its weight, basically, at this point. We can't use it anymore.
Anything else? Okay, moving right along. The first item on regular business, 21-197, is to hear a report from Michael Porter of the Broadband Committee.
Okay, this is not the real, sorry, I'm Michael Porter. I'm the chair of the broadband committee. This is not the real report. This is I asked time to give you kind of a progress report on what we've been doing, because we've been going since late April. And I think we've got to do. They've been weekly since then. And we looked at a lot of alternatives. Ultimately, we arrived at a clear consensus that the way to get decent internet service to everybody who wants it is to run fiber to the house, to everybody's house who wants it. But not necessarily, if you don't want it, you don't have to do it. And make it at an affordable price. This is the technology that's presently available, and it'll support higher speeds when those become necessary in some future time. The situation is bad now. Some people have okay internet, say they're happy, they don't want to know about anything else. But some other people, I know this, I've looked at the Axiom ESP slant reports, that is the technology. Some other people are paying the same price, but they've got a set of 6 megabits per second. They've got like 700K, which is, well, it's better than when you had to dial up and put your telephone in the acoustic cover, but not a whole lot better. And what we found looking around the state, talking to the main broadband coalition, was that the towns that own the fiber are generally speaking happy than ones that are dealing with the contractor. I think it's probably safe to say that no one on the committee is a really great fan of town ownership, but realistically, nobody else is going to build a fiber network out here. It goes everywhere. We're too few people, we're too scattered, just like we don't have cable. Okay, I don't want to give you any numbers, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but you've seen enough numbers, and I've done enough analysis, that I can say confidently that we can get a fiber system built, paid for by a combination of grants and users, with no town tax involved. And the cost to the individual subscriber, just about what the DSL is costing them now. But of course, with fiber, the speed would be incredibly high. We have halfway decent internet service, about like Ireland average in our house. A while back, we had a college age granddaughter and a roommate come to visit. The only time I could get emailing was 6 o'clock in the morning. Because with each of them had a tablet, a laptop, and they were doing joint homework projects with their friends in other places. And a lot of other people have stories like that. This would, the fiber, that wouldn't be a problem. The mechanism is that we own the network from day one. We have a long-term contract with a provider to maintain it and operate it. And this would have periodic review. Maybe every 3 years, maybe every 2 years, but anyway. And pay for it by a combination of bond and grant funding. But the users pay the contractor, the way you pay for your DSL now or telephone or anything else. Contractor turns around and pays the town enough money, first or private, so that we end up with enough money at the end of the year to pay the debt service on the bond. This way, it's the users who pay for it. People who don't use it won't pay. Planting. RFP is out. Some of you probably know, some of you don't. We put out an RFP. But hopefully get some responses. Responses are due in 2 weeks. The 27th. Actually, a little more. The intent is to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen August 4th, if that's a meeting night. If not, anyway, whatever the first meeting in August is, provided we can get a recommendation together in time to get the facts. But right around then. We had that kind of a pressure deadline because there was a grant opportunity. There was a deadline of August 17th. But we heard today that because of the federal priorities in this grant, federal grant, no, they're not considering any projects in Cumberland County because it doesn't meet the feds requirements. It's too big. This particular grant thing from the feds was apparently meant for very sparsely populated rural counties. And we're sparsely populated, but we live in Cumberland County. So the state is going to put together a joint request for this money, but it's not going to include anything from Cumberland or maybe whatever the next most populous county is. So we have a little more breathing room but there'll be more grants. There's all this, everybody in the world is talking about grants for broadband, so there'll be more. So basically, that's the extent of where we are. I'll ask answer questions if anybody has them.
Okay, is there anyone from the board who has a question to ask Michael?
Just curious about, you set up a 2-week timeframe from the
Yeah.
announcement of proposal
Yeah.
to when they were due, which you said you had to do because there was a grant
Yeah.
requirement to get moving on,
Yeah.
which no longer exists.
Yeah.
Why not extend the deadline a little bit and give people a little more time to develop a proposal and find possibly, I don't know where all this has been published, but aside from the should be webpage, for people that might be interested in doing something, time to find it and do something about it.
Well, my suggestion was if you publish it on the MMA website and on the big website, and I thought this would nail it, which I have done to the various internet operators that seem to be active in the state, which is CCI and Axiom and maybe Great Works and First Light Fiber. And realistically, I don't think somebody's going to come out of the blue and want to operate it, but we could extend the deadline, yeah.
I mean, wouldn't it? I mean, from what you said, it would be hard to do something.
Well, the other thing is that both Axiom and Consolidated have been in conversation with us all along, so they know this is coming. And realistically, I would include the other two companies, but I think it's going to be either Axiom or Consolidated that has a winning bid. So they know the territory, and that they're about DSL service is split more or less between them. I think, even, I don't know how many subscribers consolidated. I think it's about even. So I would think they'd be ready to jump right on it.
Anyone else on the board have a question? Mike?
Mike, I found it interesting that so far you guys seem to be of the opinion that the people that would subscribe to this proposed upgrade would pay enough back in to pay the debt service. What are you using for an estimate for that? Or
Okay, I'm people now are paying, I think $49 for consolidated and 25 actually, something close to that. I'm proposing $50, and the RFP is $50 as the base service cost for less than 50 megabits up and 50 megabits down. So, radical. And service up is going to be much more. So anyways, big upgrade, but very close to the same price. Higher speed costs more, like they do now. And I don't know what, that'd be in the matter of the responses to the proposal.
yeah,
But $50 is what we put in the RFP, so what we expect.
so $50 per household times a number of households compared to what the town might have to use on top of any possible grant.
Yeah, we would need,
procurement.
I think our numbers seem to say that we would need 200 households. And what I would do, that proposal would be that once we have a solid proposal from some company, then I may have something better. But we're at 225 Axiom households now, I don't know how many consolidated ones. I don't think we are altogether 400, or almost 500 locations, 9/11 addresses, in fact. I don't think we'd have trouble getting to 200, but my thought was that we would, when the time comes, before we proceed, we would get commitments from at least 200 people to subscribe. Or we always have something to give.
Thank you, Mike.
Michael, I was wondering, would there be a seasonal rate for people who didn't want it for 12 months out of the year? And how would that play into the equation?
We didn't put it in the RFP, but, and I don't know what everybody does, but I would think that would be part of this. I think that's a part of the negotiations down the road. But that would have to be balanced out.
Right, well, I was thinking, because if you figure out with that many users, they don't pay
Yeah.
the whole year.
Yeah.
You need more a proportion of more year round than you do. Okay.
That's true, and that would be a problem. But you remember when, if you were a summer person, you didn't pay your electric bill more too. You shut off
Well, and the
electricity.
telephone, I think some people still turn off their telephone for
Yeah.
there's a readiness to serve charge or something. I don't know if they still do that or not.
Yeah.
I know it used to happen.
Yeah, all that used to happen. So that'll have to be worked
I
out.
paid something, I know one of my cousins paid something, but she didn't pay the full telephone bill. Okay, anyone else on the board before I open it up to the public? Anybody from the staff have a question? All right, is there anyone who would like to ask Michael a question about broadband?
About just getting, the internet and things like that, because Axiom and the telephone company have all private channels, you can't do it, they say.
No, but the old infrastructure, the copper wires that run around the house, it used to be telephone wires, are something. And it's mostly the connection, the wires itself, something, but there's a lot of connections between you and the where it all comes together, everyone's. And that's the problem, that's, they talk about DSL as being speeds up to 25 megabits per second. It's not happening, it should be. It means, and some people, some people have halfway decent service, and some people have really essentially none. And that part of the deal, part of what we're interested in is making it the same for everybody.
So, and I think that's a good point, and just for, so that Al knows, that was Ken Cabri speaking from the back of the building.
Yeah.
And, she lives on the Cottage Road and does not finds it very difficult to get, DSL. And I think there are other people in this room who, live on the West End who have a difficult time, and I think that's one of the drivers of this project.
Yes, a main purpose was to get internet around, good internet, around everybody, anybody who wants it. We don't want to make somebody take it. If you're happy with what you got, that's fine, but for everybody who wants it, take it of it.
Okay, thank you. Last call if anybody has a question, Michael. All right, thank you, Michael. We look forward to hearing back from you.
Yeah, August.
Yeah. So the next, oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Yeah, well, you said the seat. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is, and this is really good news, to approve and sign the project partnership agreement between the Department of the Army Corps of Engineers and Chebig Island for the dredging, and to authorize the town treasurer to make the 10% down payment. There is a suggested motion to approve the project partnership agreement and to authorize the town treasurer to pay the 10% upfront share, or approximately $204,100. Do I
So
hear?
moved.
Thank you, Bo. Is it
Second.
and seconded by Jerry. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Justin, just as a quick.
Okay, so the agreement you have already signed, but you can't act individually, so I need you to vote tonight, because you made the motion, make it official. And just so everybody's aware, the Army Corps, the surveyors will be out here tomorrow, then we'll be out in the water, surveying the ground, and everything right now looks like it's gonna happen this winter. Everything's moving along very nicely. So, fingers crossed.
And for the public, in our memo from the Army Corps, they said that they plan to go for bid as soon as possible, so that this will happen between, in the season 21-22. And what that means is they have a window from October through the end of March when they have to bid dredging can happen. So hopefully by March 31st, we will have a new channel bridge. And so all of the issues that we've been dealing with in that area will go away. All right, anyone on the board have a question, comment? All right, anyone in the public before we vote? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. All right, moving on. The next item on the agenda is to review and accept the proposal from Barney Baker for Phase 1 Indian Point Emergency Repair. There's a suggested motion so that we can discuss to approve the proposal by Baker Design Consultants dated June 16th, 2021, and to expend monies, and we can talk about how much that is when we actually get ready to vote, from the Indian Point Reserve account for this purpose. We have a motion.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. So now I would like to turn the meeting over to Justin, who will introduce Barney Baker, the engineer who we've been with.
So Barney Baker has met with us and representatives from Indian Point. Out at that point there, we had discussions with him, and he presented this proposal for the town's consideration for Phase 1. And if you just want to briefly go through it, and then maybe if there are any questions afterward, we can kind of answer them that way.
Sure, Justin,
That
thank
makes
you.
sense? Okay.
Yeah. So my name is Barney Baker. If it's okay if I sit here, I think I can see myself.
Can you see? Okay, then we go then.
Yeah, on it. So I'm the principal of Baker Design Consultants. It's a engineering firm based in Freeport. We specialize in waterfront projects. On Shabby, we were the engineers for Hamilton Beach. That was a project that kind of addressed the stabilization for, I think, 7 properties on the beach there. We've done some work at the, probably our most famous project, the golf course fee is the part of the stone wharf. And we're now working on the stone wharf with Wright Pierce on that project. So we were approached by the town to look at the emergency repairs out at Indian Point, or the need for emergency repairs. And so I did have a site visit with Indian Point company representatives and also the town, Donna and Justin. So I put together a proposal which essentially is in 2 parts. One is to address the emergency portion of the repairs. And then second is to look at the longer term measures that can be done. And so why did I break it up like that? Well, DEP has also been out to the site. The town has had Lucian Langlois out to look at it. He's kind of a coastal expert with Maine DEP. I believe also Pete Slavinsky with the Maine Geological Survey has been out to look at it. Basically the town is able to go in and do emergency repairs, which would address some of the stabilization problems that are out there right now. We've had overtopping and some washouts and the roads in danger. So clearly you need to do some remedial action to, essentially maintain what you've got. And so that would be one part of it. And that comes, you could do that tomorrow if you were ready, according to the DEP, but you would need to come in after the fact and get permitting for the work. So obviously, whatever you do, and if what we would design for you would be we keep DEP kind of informed, because the last thing you want to do is go out and do some repairs, then come to find out you can't get a permit for them afterwards. So we would work to do that. And then as the longer term measures to correct items out there are really designed to look at climate change and sea level rise and see how that might affect the causeway and the facility out there, and to see what can be done to increase the resiliency of the surfaces that are there, both to protect town access to the public beach, but also the wildlife coastal wetland that exists on the north side, and the kind of the land trust interest, and also the Indian Point Company interest for access. So it's kind of it's a great opportunity to hopefully find a grant that will do these repairs for you. We've already started looking. Justin sent me some information about the in-lieu fee fund, which DEP and Army Corps administer. And what that does is they take projects that impact eelgrass primarily, or coastal marsh, and they levy a charge if there's an impact for each of those projects, and then they put that money into a pool and they hand it back out for different projects. So the challenge for this one, there's no direct compensation program for sand dunes, which is what the Indian Point Causeway is, but there may be a connection with the freshwater wetland, because if looking ahead, if nothing is done out there, my understanding in the short time that I've looked at it is that if the causeway were if the road was washed out and the seawater was allowed to wash over the causeway from south to north, that the ultimate damage would occur to that wetland that exists down there, and that would be obviously not good. So that would be the connection to try to get that grant. I've talked to the Center for Innovation that's been created up at the governor's office to see what sort of funding might be available for resiliency measures, and they've said, interesting projects, check back later. And we talked to the Casco Bay Estuary Partnership. They have programs, I think, and have already met money to the land trust, but that might be a source also. So in a nutshell, the proposal that I've put together for the town addresses the emergency needs and then looks at the longer term opportunities for protection of the area. And I do have my proposal up on the board, and I can refer to those. I've got some charts in there and some pictures and some drawings, but I guess really what I'm here is to answer any specific questions that the board has regarding the proposal.
Thank you, Brian. Before I open this up to the board, I want to read a letter that we received from Bob Halpin, who is the president of the Indian Island Corporation. It says, I am pleased to report that at last night's meeting, this was last week, of the shareholders of the Indian Island Company, the shareholders overwhelmingly approved an authorization to commit up to $4,500 in financial support of the town's efforts to assess and respond to the coastal erosion threatening Indian Point Road. Our sister organization, the Indian Island Association, so there's two different groups represented within Indian Island, had previously approved a similar commitment of up to $5,000, bringing the overall contribution to $9,500. This contribution is predicated on the current scope of the Baker design proposal and a total expenditure of $18,493. So with that, that's a little bit more than half of the cost for this project that will, if it goes forward, will come from Indian Island. And so I just want to publicly acknowledge that and thank them for doing that, because we do have an agreement with Indian Island, and they that we are responsible for the road, but at the same time, Bonnie's looking at this globally, so it's a partnership if we decide to go forward. So I'm going to ask the board if they have any questions to ask Bonnie, and then I will open up to the public after that. Anyone? So.
Just wondering if you had gotten a chance to, did you directly talk to Maine DEP?
Maine DEP, yes, Lucian Lois.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, Lucian is his first name anyway.
Language.
Yeah. there you go.
So do you know if he sent anything in writing to you, or email or something to?
I know that I followed up on a conversation that actually a site meeting that he had with the town. So no, I don't have anything from writing for him. One thing that we would do, the emergency action plan that he talked about is called, I think, a 480Q, and it's actually written as a legislative opportunity for sand dune environments, because I don't know how they got the legislation through. We've used the 480Q provision before to make very quick emergency repairs to a structure like a seawall that's in the dune, because you're just one storm away for something really terrible happening if you don't do anything. And so that's what you would the town would apply here. The structures that you have down there, to be specific, I can just show you some pictures real quick. I apologize, I spent if people are watching, I spent the whole evening trying to get my computer to talk to my projector. And they just don't get along tonight. I don't know what it is. But, this is looking down, but these structures, these seawalls at the end have been damaged. So that's an obviously repair measure. And then in the foreground, you can see the remnants of earlier seawalls that are here. So the inference here would be, we try to, get permission to build back out to where these original lines were. That might be a stretch if that's been a long time since that's happened. That's why we need to keep DEP informed. And then on the Indian Island Company, I keep getting that wrong, and I apologize to the folks that are here. But there are resiliency measures that are, there's some stone, there's some tree parts that are down there. The point is that the landward has been washed out. So the idea is that you can fill back in towards those original measures. That would be the goal. And then with the beach access, I think this is near the beach access. Make out at the public access. So we would try to make that a walkable gradient. If you have elderly people that go down there, or anybody with disabilities or whatever, we want to make the beach as accessible as possible. So we try to design something that would be easily accessed to the beach. And generally, that's acceptable from a fundamental permit ability. That would be probably qualified for permit by rule. So long-winded answer to your question.
So, so your proposal is to give us an engineer drawing for the emergency work, and then an engineer drawing for a more permanent solution.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how they'll blend together. I mean, we're looking at emergency repairs, but they've been an emergency for how long now? Probably since the storms this last winter, right? So part of the work we're doing, we're getting a surveyor to come in to survey both properties. And what that's going to do is that's going to give us a tool that we can put on the computer so that we can use that to design solutions, but also determine, quantities and areas of impact. So that what the goal is to give you the tools to execute some emergency repairs. Hopefully all of them, if you can, fund those appropriately. But also to give you a document that would be, here, you can send this to a grant authority and say, this is what we're trying to do. Can you, help support that project? So it's kind of giving you the tools to make improvements down there.
One of the things when we met with Lucian, one of his suggestions, and Justin was there, Bo was there, and Ted Ballard who's here, and so they can correct me if I'm wrong, was his suggestion was that it could go as far as where the original barricade, or whatever you call it, was. And it was possible to go a little bit further than that, depending on the slope, because his suggestion was using, kind of flat rocks and doing gradual kind of thing, with the long-term plan being taking out those bulkheads and making the whole thing that way. Did he talk to you about that?
He didn't talk specifics with me. And you need to be a little careful. I think you have, through an after-the-fact permit, the ability to, what is that after-the-fact permit going to look like? Is it going to be an after-the-fact permit by rule, which would be, a short document and very inexpensive to put together, or is it going to be a full NRPA permit, which may require specialized bird people, or you're allowed to, full NRPA permit, you can generally impact up to 500 square feet of coastal wetland. but it comes at you have to put in a very comprehensive permit application for that.
Yeah, he did not indicate that we should get into the wetlands at that time. That was something different, right? That would be if we wanted to do the parking, or that was a totally different thing.
So you're thinking the wetlands on the north side, is that right?
Right.
So the coastal wetland is where the ocean comes in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Oh,
you've got the coastal wetland and you've got the freshwater. wetland.
okay, I thought you were talking about the first one. Okay. All right, anybody else? Jen?
So you mentioned Pete Solowski,
Zelinski?
Slopinski?
Yeah.
And have you been corresponding with him? I know he's the state geologist that's been looking at this for a very long time.
I talked with him. The first thing he said to me was, you know, that area is a FEMA, there's a special designation that FEMA gives areas that they do not want to ever provide federal funding for. And that has that designation. And he reminded me of that. But he's very focused on the dune environment and very supportive of, measures to protect the dune. He's not going to want to see a lot of hard armoring where there isn't, hard armoring now. He's going to want to see planted solutions. He's running programs in Castro Bay in Brunswick right now using shell baskets. I suggested, well, this is Chabig, let's build lobster traps out there. But so he's a champion for coastal resiliency. So we'll certainly use him and contact him and share any solutions that we have with him to get both his support, but also his concurrence.
And the reason this is being called an emergency is because why?
So the emergency designation allows you to make repairs without doing a permit. And I think the emergency designation that Lucian has applied to this fulfills that section of the law that allows you to do that. But in another description, it's an emergency because if you don't do anything, that road is going to wash out, and it's going to you're going to have you're not going to be able to get any public safety equipment down to the beach if someone gets hurt. You're not going to be able to beach access, could be a problem, except for pedestrians. But I think it's a town, public way to the beach, right? So I think the emergency is if you do nothing, you stand to lose that access.
The way he described it to us was that it was in jeopardy if we have fall storms like we had last time, if we don't do anything. And I think Ted and Bo and Justin can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically that was what he considered the emergency of, but why we wouldn't have to take the time to do all the paperwork because
It's so vulnerable right now.
time is not on our side. I have a question too about the FEMA designation. That must have been done after 2007 because FEMA put in $40,000 or $50,000 into that area in 2007 after the Patriot State storm.
Right.
Because I don't remember since we've become a town, but I was off the board getting any kind of a notice about that. And I know that back in the 80s, we did get notices when we were part of Cumberland when they designated some of these areas.
It's on the preliminary map, which is, that's the one that's in the state of limbo right now. It's about to be adopted.
Also, it hasn't actually been adopted yet.
It's not officially been adopted for Cumberland County.
Oh,
I think they keep saying it's gonna happen soon, but,
okay, so it's been designated but not approved. Is that what you're saying?
I believe that's the case. I don't think it's on the old map.
Okay.
I can confirm that for you.
Carol, have a hand up? No, I'll go back to
Wait
you.
for it.
Okay. All right, anybody else on the board have a question? Mark and Jay.
Barney, somebody you said, if that road washed out from the ocean and it got into the freshwater wetland, that would not be good. So could you explain what you mean by that specifically? Is that just interrupting the natural resource flow of things down there?
So I think that probably happens now, but very occasionally.
Right.
But if you get a significant washout, and it happens more often, then that wetland, that coastal wetland is gonna go through, some sort of transformation process because it's gonna have, the influx of salt water more often than it does now. I'm not a coastal wetland expert, but it stands to reason that is what will occur if the road is not there to essentially protect it, act as a barrier.
And if this town / community decides to go ahead and pursue emergency, temporary, if you would, repairs to that road, would there realistically be any chance, in your opinion, of getting grants for even that amount of work?
I haven't identified a source yet. And I've already started working on it, but more out of interest so that I could speak with some authority tonight. We have, our company gets a lot of grants from municipalities for waterfront structures or public access. And so, there is a public access component of this project. That might be a need for it. Typically, I have not seen projects for municipalities where there aren't protecting infrastructure.
Yeah.
So that's really for example, we're doing a seawall design to protect the downtown Machias right now from flooding. That's a big FEMA grant that we got. But yeah, here it's a bit of a stretch because there aren't any, there's not a population involved and there's not a sewer or water main. But no one has said no. Everybody has said, yeah, this, we've got to address projects like this. So I don't think you need to give up.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly not insinuating anything in that direction. You and I talked briefly on the phone today, and like I said to you, I'm certainly probably willing to take a glance at some temporary or emergency repairs to this road to see if that's possible after you give us if you give us a design and a proposal. I am a little skeptical that we can beat Mother Nature down there with that elevation once you get down there.
Yeah.
And drive through the dunes. I'm just saying what I see and watching the storms and watching the stone wharf and stuff nowadays. So
Right.
I have a little bit of skepticism with that, but anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Sort of following up a little bit of what Mark just said. Given the sea level rise, is a fact of life these days. Everything that I've seen down there, it's sort of like we're talking about a sand castle on a beach and trying to defend it against the incoming tide. And the answer to that is it's not likely to be very successful. And, or you're gonna end up spending a huge amount of money. I mean, you could start driving steel walls down there and defend the whole area. You know, just like Battery Park in New York or Chicago or any other number of places. The point, not to get too off track, but is that you have a series of things, climate change, sea level rise, that are washing that out. And I'm very familiar with the work we did on Hamilton Beach. That was a very different kind of project, I think. This is all very low. And you're trying to build, you know, we're talking about trying to build something around something that Mother Nature is telling us it's going to get wiped out. So I sort of find it hard to understand why we would be spending a lot of money doing so. The emergency definition of things seems a little stretched, being that it's going on 4 or 5 months since the last washout and that started this conversation. And it'd probably be several more months anyway before much of anything got done. So that's, emergency seems to be a bit of a stretch. The other questions I had concerned your proposal. One, background data collection, that's all the GIS data and everything else. We have all that. You don't have to go anywhere to collect.
Right, so background data collection is exactly that. It's looking at what the town already has. It's going on looking at the main GIS office and downloading that material. So it's not a heavy lift, I don't think, in our proposal, but it's what we use to collect and kind of inform our drawings with information that's already available.
Yeah, that and then the land survey seemed, I wasn't sure how that fit in, given the information we already had.
So the land
GIS
survey, you don't have a land survey to my knowledge. What that is going to give us is a very detailed kind of I'm trying to think of the correct word, but it's going to give the current state of affairs down there, so that
Current topography.
the current topography, yeah. So it's gonna tell us, gonna give us the elevation data, because, I mean, to speak to your earlier comment, that there, which was somewhat, basically saying, look, we're gonna get inundated eventually anyway, why do anything at all? So there are some things you can do. We can make the road more resilient. We can raise the road elevation. And we can put more plantings down there on the south side to make it strong. We've done projects on the coast where, we've used riprap to protect the frontage. And I'm not suggesting that in areas here that aren't already riprap, because that's very expensive. And in some ways, it's not as successful as a planting regimen and, strengthening of the toe. Sort of a due nourishment feasibility solution. So I think there are some things that you can do to mitigate climate change, and but if you do nothing, you are going to get to a situation where you can't use that property faster than if you use some of these measures that we're suggesting might be possible.
Anyone else on the board for the question? Another question, Jay, or you want?
No, for the time being, it's good.
Okay. All right, anyone in the staff have a question, Bonnie? All right, anyone in the public? And would you please go over to that chair if you have something you'd like to say?
For those that I don't know, I'm Ted Ballard, and I came tonight because I thought it might be useful to have someone be able to talk a bit about the history of how did we come to where we are with the existence of that road. I want to support the decision that the town has to look at and figure out what to do. It is a decision for the town, not a decision for me. Company, it's a funny term that it would be that it's a big name like that. It's actually three siblings that set up a company to own and common this farm that they had inherited. And then later on, it was enlarged to some of the neighbors around the Cottage Road. And so when you think about, who is this outfit, among people, it's those Western families that have been part of this community for a long time. And for nearly 100 years, we tried to protect the Indian point purely private. And it was my father, also named Ted Ballard, who got concerned that if we didn't put in place more structured protections, we were going to lose control of something that we think is precious. And it took 15 years of work. But in 1999, a conservation easement was put in on the whole Union Point below Susie Steadroff's house. And it's divided into a public section, which is the majority of the land area, and then a reserve section of the actual point itself where the boathouse is for the recreation activities that the owners maintain. The protected area is about 15.5 acres. It's 3,700 feet of shoreline, and that is a deeded easement. It was contemplated that there would be something done about the road, but the easement didn't do anything in particular about the road. And in parallel, there was work with the town, and at that time it was the town of Cumberland, which led to the road maintenance agreement that was signed in 2002. And that is also a deeded document. As the discussions were going on, I put together a brief synopsis of what does the road agreement actually say. And I brought some copies if the board would like them. Be happy to share them.
That'd be great.
So, if I could ask you that, I have 10, so. So everybody has a copy. What you have in front of you is just one page. On the left-hand side is the survey drawing that's included in the easement, and it just shows what's what, where's where. And it includes the road and the public access point for the beach and the dedicated 100-foot wide beach access that goes down at that point. And that's the place where, if you recall from last summer, the ramp was put in to get down over the bump. And that's part of the problem that Barney's been talking about the impact in the dune area. The area where the erosion of the seawall is further back up the point, where it's not really, it's not sanding. It's the land and where the ledge runs out, and it becomes, the beach, and it's being eroded. And it is the road agreement, as you see, is called public access easement and road maintenance agreement. And what was decided between the company and the town at that time, with the participation of the land trust, who was the steward of the conservation purposes that were already in place, was to set up this arrangement and to grant a public easement over the road, and the town to maintain the road as a public easement down to the access point that you're familiar with. And that the town construct the parking and turning area for 5 cars down at that end. And that the maintenance of this easement would be the responsibility of the town. And the last bullet point that's described there is that the agreement and the easement continue as long as the town uses and maintains the road in accordance with this agreement. And that, as I understand it, is sort of how we got to be in a situation where there's a town responsibility. And that was entered into not quite 20 years ago. And it's not for me to say whether the town thinks this is a good thing. The people that put it together, I think, thought it was a good thing for the property owners and a good thing for Shabbat, and a good thing for the land trust. We, as Donna read from the letter, Bob Halper, who's the current president of the company, we felt it was important to commit now to be supportive of doing the engineering work. Because maintaining the road is pretty clear under this document. But I don't think maintaining the road includes engineering the response to climate change. That, I don't think, was contemplated 20 years ago as being something, and we now face new realities, and we who have a private interest as well as a public interest in clean, I think it's part of our responsibility to figure out what to do. So that's the reason I think that there was a overwhelming support among saying, we need to be with the boss, figuring this out. I would like to offer any help that we can do, and that I personally can do, so help you figure out how you want to go forward. That's really what I want to say.
Anyone on the board has a question to ask of Ted? Thank you, Ted.
One quick question, not for Ted, but why is the land trust not here?
The land trust, I talked to the land trust about a month or 6 weeks ago. It was about the time we were doing town meeting. Because I wanted to make sure that they were on board with what, what was going on, what they knew. And they basically said this was really a political decision, and they really didn't want to take a stand on, they weren't going to advocate one way or the other. That's what I talked to Chris Cabot, who was their executive director. I talked to a board member, and they told me to call him, and that's what I called.
Sort of seems like they have a stake.
No, well, they do have a stake, but as Ted pointed out, the road part of it really doesn't have anything. they don't have any responsibility in the world. And so, I mean, all I know is what they said. We could get a letter from them at some point if somebody wanted us to, that would be possible. All right, anyone else in the audience have any comments, questions? Carol?
So I've talked to the selectmen several times about Indian Point. I won't review some of those previous discussions, but I have to say it's a little frustrating that despite our recommendations, and this is the planning board, the town hasn't availed themselves of the expertise of the Maine Geological Survey, which has been mapping and monitoring the beach for a number of years. So I'm just going to repeat that again today, that, you know, Pete Slavinsky, who's responsible for the coastal area beach mapping program, has been out there and is going to be back out there this month. And just to clarify a couple things, because Barney is incorrect, the beach at Indian Point was designated as coastal barrier beach sometime in the mid-1980s as part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Program. It's not a FEMA program. That program prohibits the expenditure of federal funds on most engineering improvements because it's a recognition that these are naturally unstable systems, and it's to discourage engineering development and controls in these kinds of environments. And also, the state of Maine has an analogous program that prohibits expenditures, so state grant money cannot be used for those same types of projects. So as far as I'm aware, and this is from Pete, there are no federal or state grant programs that can be used to fund these repairs. So I'm a little confused about what Barney is suggesting we pursue from a grant program standpoint unless it's private grants. But Pete has said this more than once, and I did communicate that to the selectmen previously. So it was back in the mid-1980s that it was designated a coastal barrier resource. The expenditure of the funds after the Patriots Day storm, as far as Pete is aware, was an error. And it was partly, you know, because there was a disaster area declared, he believes that that was just a mistake in terms of using those funds to repair that road. There are not that many coastal barrier resources in Maine, particularly of the size of this one because it's pretty small. But there are actually 3 on this, you know, on Great Big Island. But there are others like Saco and some of these other beaches that most people are pretty familiar with. But my comments tonight are really, like Jay, I feel like we're reinventing the wheel here when I reviewed this proposal. There's already been an inundation study done by Greater Portland Council of Governments for the town of Trebegan, and it's been on our website for probably 4 or 5 years. It clearly shows what the different inundation scenarios are for Indian Point. Pete has been doing beach profiles for a number of years out on the beach and has been monitoring the movement of sand and the change in the profile. So I can't imagine why we would repeat what he is already doing. And then besides that, I think I guess what I would say is some of the structures out there now are really causing some of the erosion. I mean, that was Pete's takeaway, that the existing seawalls actually, so the more you may try to protect the road, the more you may erode the beach face. So that's a trade-off this, you know, you've got to consider. And I would highly recommend, as I've recommended in the past, this is the 3rd time I came to the selectmen in the fall of 2019, in the spring of 2020, and then again before town meeting just this year. I really think that you should have Pete meet with the selectmen as he's offered to do, and to hear what he has to say based on his work out there. He is, as Barney said, he is doing a number of innovative programs with offshore types of beach protection that are not as, as disruptive and frankly, they're basically using more natural materials to try to stabilize beach areas. But, I'm a little confused about these emergency repairs because when I read the DEP sanding regs, this is a map sanding. You can make these emergency repairs, but the way I read it is that material needs to be removed. Is that true?
What do, you want me to tell you what?
I don't know, I'm not asking about Lucian because he's not an expert, I don't believe.
Okay, all we know is he told us he was the person who permitted, and he said that whatever we do as an emergency, a long term would be taking out those bulkheads.
I don't know what you mean, a long term will be taken, I don't know what you were
It
saying.
means the next phase of the plan would be, the first would be to mitigate where the road is.
And my understanding from the meeting that I had with Selectmen before town meeting, whatever that was, June, the plan was to put riprap or some kind of
He never
hard
said,
material down.
he didn't say riprap, he said, his suggestion was stones that would be gradual, and he explained about how what was happening now is that the wave action was coming in, and those bulkheads were creating more force, because then when the wave came back out, it was going around it. And what he was talking about is something that would be a gentle a slope, and that the waves would come up and then go back in a much more gentle way.
And he's talking about that as a permanent placement.
What he said was that he would expect that the whole thing would be mitigated. I mean, somebody else who was there, Bonnie,
Well, I obviously wasn't there, but the provisions where we've used the 480Q before, what you got to show is that if you don't do anything, you've got to show that there'll likely be further damage. So that's really the litmus test of an emergency repair. The obvious solution would be if you had a wall that was undermined or it was failing because the backfill had been washed out, you can go in and make repairs to make that structurally competent again. The fine point here, and to speak to your, we certainly will consult with Pete Slavinsky, and he does have a number of solutions that he's used on different beaches. We've done a lot of work in Scarborough and Wells, and collaborated with Pete Slavinsky on some of these projects, and have always benefited from the solutions that he suggests, but have had to make the engineering decisions and do the engineering calculations and the drawings and designs. He's a coastal geologist, so his expertise really is in coastal processes, but it's not in the design of kind of resiliency measures.
I guess I would say that he is the individual most familiar with the dynamics of that system, which is why I recommend you consult him. And also he's free. He's a state employee. This program is intended to be available to municipalities to assist them with these kinds of decisions. And I would strongly advise that you have him come for a public workshop where all the interested parties could attend and ask questions. I understand, I really appreciate the fact that the Ballard family has put a conservation easement on that property. I go down there myself quite a bit. I think Ted also recognizes that the conditions that we face now with climate change were maybe not anticipated back 20 years ago when these things were determined. I'm not suggesting we not work with everybody in the room to try to protect that resource. But I do encourage the town to take advantage of the help that the state agency, Maine Geological Survey has, which this is their purview, monitoring coastal barrier systems. Then it would make sense to me if there's an engineering, solution, then it would make sense to perhaps pursue that. But I don't understand why we are already jumping to an engineered solution without first getting some background on the problem for everybody, not just Barney and not just me. I mean, I think for the whole community, because these things are gonna be happening. We have other coastal barrier systems on the island that we should be aware of that may be subject to some of the same things. And I don't know if the town is gonna jump in and, repair some of those or monitor or, get involved in trying to stabilize some of those types of systems. So I hope that, so all I'm asking is that you take advantage of the expertise that's available to you. And it is a little frustrating because that was over a year ago that I suggested that. And
And
and it
Carol, I
was
think
the time that I suggested last time was when there was a proposal for a $45,000 engineering study down there.
okay, Carol, I think that at the last meeting, that you had said you were going to set up a meeting a year ago, and then it didn't happen because of whether COVID or whatever with him. And then you talked about trying to get him to come down.
Donna, it's not my responsibility.
I'm not saying it's your responsibility.
I'm not
okay.
proposing that modification to this. I mean, the town is undertaking a pretty substantial investment in an engineering project. I really think it's the town's responsibility to contact Pete.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because I misunderstood what you were talking about before. And so, I think that, that part of it is that none of us up here are engineers or experts. What we're looking at is to hire somebody, a consultant, who can then make those contacts and get that information, bring that person down here if they think that is important. But I don't know anybody at this table who really has that expertise.
But
And
I
that's
think
why we're looking to hire a consultant to help us.
okay. I mean, I don't know what else I can do other than come to the selectmen and say, this person is available to help you. And, and Pete was here last summer, he's gonna be here this month. And he has offered to meet with the selectmen, but it's really the selectmen's job to contact him.
Thanks for the clarification. Yeah.
So Pete can come talk to me if he wants, or I can call him, and it's gonna be, I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't know. I know some of the shore and stuff like that, and it's washing away. He can give me scientific names and all that stuff. I still don't know what he's talking about. I'm looking to hire a guy that'll go, this is what we're proposing to do. And I don't know if Pete's the one that goes, you can't do that. I don't know who says that. I'm looking to go, can we do something on there or not? And if we can't, then we don't.
You can, I guess.
I just don't know which direction do you think the board should go right now? To find a solution for down there.
I think the board should get educated about the challenges of dealing with climate change in these types of systems. That's what I think. And I think it applies not just to this project, but to other sites in the town. And Pete is not a compliance person, he's not the DEP. He is a geologist that is monitoring the systems. And I think before you jump to, let's fix this, I think it's important that we understand the trade-offs. I think Barney would agree with that these systems are not, they're dynamic systems. They're not stable. It's not the same as doing a shoreline stabilization project. And if you want to go down there and armor, the road so that it doesn't wash away, there's going to be consequences to that. There's also all kinds of criteria that you have to meet, because that is a max sand dune, in the state of Maine. So you have to follow the sand dune laws, and that limits how much you can do, especially when it comes to expanding and improving a seawall. But tonight, I heard that we were gonna try to get grants for this, and my understanding is you're gonna have a very limited opportunity for any federal or state grants.
And thank you, because I think that that may be the case, it may not be the case. But I think what Bo's saying, and this is at least where I'm coming from, is that we need to start someplace. And that by hiring someone who's an engineer, where we have a private partnership, where the town right now has $80,000 in a dedicated fund, 42 people to 12 voted to put money into that fund at town meeting. That by starting with having Barney at least look at the problem and then reach out to people like Pete or Lucian or whomever, that at least that's a place to start. Then he comes back with a plan or with some idea after he's talked to all these people, and we can have those people come back, we can have Pete come back. I've seen Pete on TV, I mean, he does a great job. There's no question about it, but I personally, I need to see somebody come up with something concrete. And then we can at least debate what that is.
Well, my concern is that you can come up with something concrete, whether it's a practical solution is really the question.
And that's what then we'll have to.
And how are you
debate that.
going to evaluate that?
With Pete, with people that know what they're talking about. We have, almost every meeting, we come to this, to the thing, and we're like, we need a plan, we need a plan, we need a plan, and now we're trying to get a plan, and we can't even get that off the ground.
And this is what happens every time we talk about this, we get to this point in this conversation, and we either drop it or we,
I'm not suggesting you drop it, I'm just puzzled why
We
you
understand.
haven't taken advantage of that area of expertise. It seems, it's puzzling to me that you haven't.
okay, so Carol, you've made that point, and I think we need to move on. We understand that you are disappointed that we haven't done that, and as I said, I misunderstood, I thought you were trying to set up some kind of a meeting with the planning board and him coming down at some of the other meetings you talked about. We hope that if in fact we do vote to hire Bonnie to go forward, that he will help us get that information. And that we can have a workshop with Keith. But we haven't done it up to this point, and that, I'm sorry about that, but I don't know where we go from here. So, all right, we have two other comments and then people in the public. Jen?
I was just saying that it just seems prudent to me to, if he's coming in July, what's the harm of us all meeting with him in the workshop and listening to what he has to say? If Carol's asked, the board several times to do that or suggested it, it seems like an easy thing to do.
I have no problem.
Is that something you can set up for us, Justin? That would be my suggestion.
And
I would echo that it's gonna help educate us, we'll learn more, and then allow us to make better decisions.
no, I think that's fine to do that. I don't think that it has to, that has to preclude us taking action tonight. Because I kind of thought that's probably what would happen, that, Bonnie would do that with us, but I have no problem with setting up a workshop if everybody's willing to go to it. So can we wait and act on that in a few minutes? Because we have people who want to talk about what's on the agenda right now. Okay. So is there anyone else who wants to discuss this project?
I'd like to comment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. My name is Phyllis Brunner. I am actually the president of the Indian Island Association. There's two parts of Indian Island. There's the company that's in shareholders, there's the association, which is the members. It's a bigger group. It's most of the neighbors that live on Cottage Road. actually 54 of us that are part of the association, and there's 34 actual owners that are part of the company. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of Maine. I have practiced here in the state for 8 years. I was actually the project manager, and program manager for Ocean Gateway 20 years ago, so I have close experience. I see this as a great opportunity for a partnership between the town and Indian Island to come up with some answers and some direction. I don't think we should move forward as far as construction until the work is done on the analysis and the study. And that's my understanding of what the agreement is right now, is that we would do the engineering work. We would look at what's possible. We would look at what it would cost. We would look at what it would buy us as far as time. And then make decisions, informed decisions. Because I think right now there's a lot of hand waving, and then there's a lot of, just some politicizing of this issue that I think we can really cut through, and we're willing to pay for half of it. So that's, I think that's a strong position for us to come forward with tonight. It means a lot to us as an organization, and I think as the West End and as the public access as well, and we very much support that. So I would really like to see this go forward. I'm impressed with Barney's credentials. He has a great reputation here. I think he'll do some good work for us. I appreciate where Carol's coming from very much so, but I think it's an opportunity to really get some good answers.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. Anybody have any questions? All right, anyone else in the public who would like to speak to this? Evelyn?
I would just like to say I agree with what Phyllis just said. I am concerned about the area. I'm concerned about the birds and the sea ducks and all that were nesting there. And I'm also concerned about the population being able to go down there. And I think if we don't do anything soon, we're going to lose the opportunity to do something. And I'm hoping that we'll just go ahead and get some studies done. I agree with Carol. There's other, I know that I'm learning that there's other like wave breaks and things like that that might help. And I'm sure the study will find this information out and we'll get the information from the experts. And I realize that in 100 years it may be all gone, but at least for 100 years we may have something that we can all go down and be part of. And if you don't do something because it's going to be gone in the future, we wouldn't be doing anything. So I really want to see us go forward with something. But I do appreciate all your concerns, Carol. Thank you.
Anyone else? Sam?
Just, I have a question and possibly a suggestion. I'm wondering if Little Shebig is designated a historic site.
It belongs to the state of Maine Parks. I don't know if they've designated it in historic zone.
I just wonder if that being a park or continuing having access out there as well might help in getting some of the grants or funding.
That was a consideration of when we talked to Lucian Lane was. I mean, he did talk about the fact that public access is, they wouldn't be as interested in this if it wasn't public access.
But I think of Little Shebig too,
Right.
as well as that
How to
whole
get
area.
there. Jackie?
I don't want to go over there.
Okay, you're on the screen.
Good.
Well, you could say because you have a back issue.
Due to back issues. Who, do you know who is responsible for responding to an emergency at Little Shebig?
I don't know. I know that we own about 4 acres and Long Island owns the rest. I mean, it's in our jurisdiction. State owns it, but 4 acres is, the first 4 acres is in the town of Shebig, and the rest of it is in the town of Long Island. And I don't know, I guess nobody's here from the fire department. So I would assume that if there's an emergency there, they would call either Long Island or Shebig.
Probably Long Island, so they can get
Thanks.
I know when there was a drowning there, of course, Shebig, it was on the Shebig side, and so the Shebig people went. Okay, anyone else? All right, seeing no one else. So we have a motion on the floor, and we also have a suggestion for a workshop. So we can have two motions, or we can combine the motions. And so I would suggest that, I don't know that we, by consensus, we could ask Justin to set up a workshop with Pete Slavinsky with this board, if the board wants to do that, to become more educated in the issues related to the geology of that area and sea level rise. Mark?
But would it be a workshop here, or would it be a workshop / site visit there?
I don't know which it would be. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, it could be a combination, because if you can down there and walk around and look at stuff, but if he's going to want to do a presentation on, I don't know what it is he would want to do. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I think if we do a workshop with Pete, which, information, but I think it would be beneficial if we go through with this, that Barney be here,
Yes, definitely.
because, he would understand what he's talking about.
Right. All right, so let's talk about so is it the general consensus of this board that we would like to have Justin set up a meeting?
Yeah.
Mark?
This month?
Well, I mean, we don't know when he's available.
Well, we heard July, didn't we?
He's out here mapping and he said he could meet
When
with
is he coming?
interested parties when he's out here. He was planning to be here in July. For all I know, he's been here. For all I know.
But he would have availability after that if requested, likely,
But,
maybe.
All right, well, so let's just get Justin.
My only point is it's already July.
I know, well, that's what I'm thinking too. So as the earliest possible date. And because we have people who work, I would assume that we would ask him to come at, if he wanted to do it, if he felt Justin can feel him out and see what he thinks, whether it'd be beneficial to have it there and then come up here afterward. It doesn't have to be the night of the meeting, but you're gonna have to poll the board to see when you're available. But you don't want to get dark, it's gonna start getting dark earlier. By the middle of August, it's getting dark by 7:30.
I think the best thing is to just contact him,
Get
see
back
if
to
he's
us.
got any availability, see what that availability might be, daytime, afternoon, late afternoon, and then go from there and put it out in an email.
And if we vote in the affirmative on this motion, that we would then invite our consultant as well. It would be public, because anytime we all get together, it would be public, so if the New Island or any interested citizens wanted to come, they would be able to do that too. All right, so let's look at the main motion. We have a motion on the floor to expend monies. I figured out that it looked like Indian Island paid $9,500, we paid $1,993. Does that sound right? Everybody?
He can get that specific of the number.
Well, I don't know. I mean, how specific do you?
Do it not to exceed.
Not to exceed. All right, how about not to exceed $9,000? We'll round it off. I don't care.
That's part of the
Somebody else
motion.
is gonna, no, I'm not making a motion. I'm just trying to figure out what the motion should say. We have a motion already, so we need to, which was general, same monies. So do we want to put specific in there?
Just what you just said, not to exceed, what was it, 9?
9,000. Is everybody happy with that? You guys made the motion and seconded. Okay. All right. Any more discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of the motion? All opposed? 3-2. So it passes. So, Justin, if you can coordinate with Bonnie, so whenever we have Pete come down, that we can make that work. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I know, he sometimes does his conferences on Zoom. You know, he's got a lot of, likely to have a lot of material for any point.
So it may be a Zoom kind of thing as opposed to
I'm thinking that might be an option, but, obviously, if he's still in the field, I would like to meet him in the field.
yeah. So
Why don't we just let Justin find
That's
out?
what
what
I-
he wants to do?
well, that's what I
As
was,
opposed to.
that's what I was just going to say, actually. Yeah.
The state still allows us to do Zoom meetings, if so.
No, we can't.
Yes.
Oh, we can do
If it meets the criteria, and as long as we allow the public to participate. Anytime one of you wants to participate on Zoom, we have to allow the public to participate.
it. Okay.
If there's some type of hardship or something like that, that we can justify,
So if we had a consultant from the mainland who couldn't come over here,
it's not quite like that, it's usually. I'll look into it.
will you look into it?
Yeah.
Just report back. We don't
I know what it
have-
says, but there are different criteria.
We don't want to problem solve this right now. Okay, so moving on, the next agenda item, 21, 200 is to discuss the transfer station issue. And as we all know, we've had a couple of meetings, a couple of times when we've had to close the station. And Justin may want to kind of chime in here about some possibilities that he has researched regarding getting a consultant to from Greater Portland Council of Governments to give us a hand.
So the first thing I want to say is it's very, very hard to point the finger at one individual thing here. We have two vendors, and we have our town staff that's being overrun up there with a lot more trash and cardboard and everything, and we're dealt with that. That being said, Plant, Troyano, our hauler, and I are gonna go meet on Chandler's Walk Dog on Friday. They're bringing it, Plant's gonna bring it all over. Bring somebody from Troyano, I think, Dominic, and we're gonna talk about how we might, everybody knows that there's a problem, and we're gonna try to figure it out. Plant thinks they have some ideas to maybe speed it up. I asked him what he thought the major problem was, and we're all having the same problem, and everybody else can't find help. So they can't run boats like they want to, at the increments that they want to, and they're not. Obviously, all these companies aren't just serving us, so when you call, sometimes there's a delay from when we're making the call to ask them to come. Sometimes it takes more days than it has in the past for them to respond, and I don't know where that link is, but I'm hoping on Friday we can figure that out. I've also talked to Tony Plant, who is the chief operating officer of GP Cog, and he's willing to work with us with a resilience corps member. He's going to put together a proposal for them to sort of review what our waste stream looks like over the past few years, what has changed, and whether there are any easy changes either to the ordinance, the fee schedule, or some of our policies we have that might help aid in the dumpsters not filling up. It's not just household trash. We have a lot of construction out here, and contractors are filling up the construction debris dumpsters sometimes at one whack. They'll drive up there and they fill 3/4 of the dumpster, and we're stuck with that one for a week. So we don't have any place to put this stuff. So there's a lot of different things going on, and I think we could benefit from having somebody that doesn't really have any knowledge of what we're doing, and also with some knowledge about what else is going on in communities around us to sort of give us some ideas about what changes we might be able to implement. They're small now, and then there may be a suggestion from that initial study that the facility is not adequate. And if that's the case, it's going to take an engineer, it's going to take an engineering plan to design a new facility. The flow may have to change, the way people come in. You never know what can come of that. It could become a big issue, but we might be able to fix it in the short term with some small steps, so I'll keep you posted.
One of the things we, all Justin and I chatted about was, do we want to reactivate the solid waste committee to perhaps work with, or in parallel or coordination with a group? So it's just something to be thinking about. Right now, I think we're one short on the solid waste committee. According to the town website, the members of that committee are Kim Bean, Jeff Morrisuma, and Jody Federer. And there have, I think it's been basically inactive since we went with Eco Maine. You haven't seen anything.
Been inactive since I've been working.
Right,
so
yeah.
Almost 5
I
years.
think that we haven't heard much from that committee, and I don't know if they've just been reappointed. Jed?
I'd like to make one suggestion to perhaps facilitate getting through the rest of the summer is that we don't do the bulk waste and use those containers, because that'll decline. Justin was telling me that this would reduce the number of containers available for other trash. Just skip that weekend and use the containers for what we have to, the garbage and so forth.
I was thinking you were going to try to get 2 extra ones.
It was, but it's not for like that.
Oh,
Household trash, you know, it's basically bulky waste is what we use those for. And we put them brushed up, they probably filled up that weekend. What Jay is referring to, the issue is we'll be using several barges to get those 8 containers out here that would otherwise could potentially be used for,
Oh, I see.
for removing the cans that we have for our normal day-to-day stuff. And I don't know that complete impact, and I don't run those businesses, I don't know how many folks that they can handle, the barges. that
Can you
handle.
talk to them and find out about that?
It's really,
Oh,
it's a week to week thing,
Oh, so
about,
we-
you know, what other people are requesting around, you know,
Oh, I
Casco
get it,
Bay, it's hard for them to tell.
so what you're suggesting, Jay, is that we eliminate bulky waste again this year?
We put a hold on it, maybe, or
Or
either
maybe do it
eliminate
in the
it
fall?
or put a hold on it until, say, later in the fall,
Yeah,
when we'll have less of a crush.
maybe that, maybe postpone it. What do you guys think, Mark?
I would be in favor of considering postponement. I'm not in favor of canceling it again without more notice to the public. And I know from talking to Plant that they've just been up against it with gardening business this year.
Yeah. Yeah, Jay, thank you for that suggestion.
But I would like to thank Justin for his proactive thinking with GP Cog and.
Yeah.
and Brianna.
I think so too. Yes, so,
I'm just curious, I had a contractor talk to me about a job that he was doing, he was waiting for dumpsters. And Triano told him that he wasn't coming out here, his trucks weren't coming out. It was essentially just point calling dumpster out.
There is sometimes an arrangement like that where, what I understand is that they do move the cans for them sometimes. They bring them down to the, you know, where they load them, and the plant takes care of the rest of it, my understanding sometimes.
Oh, yeah, well, sometimes, but I haven't seen a Triano truck out here, like, no, I didn't see one today. Yeah, I haven't seen them like crazy, you know?
Right.
I live right next to the dump, so I know, you know, and I know, you know, Plant's truck. Although he
It's
fixed the
going-
muffler on it, but.
Okay.
But I still, you know, can tell when he's going by. So, I'm just curious if they are halting their trucks from coming over here, or at least reducing it, that's something that we looked at. And then,
Yeah.
our contract, I have to get looked at too.
Yeah.
So,
Could I ask Justin,
Sure.
have you done? When is your conversation with Plant and Triano happening?
Friday at 9 o'clock, Chambers talk, so he's bringing his own phone.
Would you mind if I participated in that conversation?
well, that's probably a good idea to get somebody from the board if you're willing to go.
And I have, you know, decent working relationship with Glenn. I was gonna just bring up the bulky waste weekend, discussion that we just had. If we're thinking about postponing that, shouldn't we make that decision rather soon, while you've got it scheduled for August 7th?
I need you to have consent, I know it's not on the agenda, but if you just kind of tell me that you're all agreed not to change.
Is there anyone who's not in agreement with postponing it? And when would we be thinking about the end of September?
I would think it should be in September.
I think you just say in the fall when things loosen up, so I'm not too specific with the date at this point.
Well, I guess I want to make sure that we do it before Columbus Day weekend, so that we don't have some people who are taxpayers who are, looking forward to that opportunity. That would be my only thing, sometime before Columbus Day.
Maybe a general statement
Yeah.
like Ken said, we're thinking about September, October, timeline movement.
A fall date.
Okay, I think we're all in agreement with that. Sounds like a great idea. Thank you for Jay for thinking of that. All right, anything else to do with the transfer station? Should we ask, let's just think about whether Justin can think about whether or not he wants to get a committee working with the consultants, if we can get those consultants. So we're going to make a decision on that right now. Okay, so going on to communicate, is there anybody else out there who wants anything to say about the dump? Jackie?
My topic is recycling versus trash. And I wonder if anybody has any idea what percentage of our population participates in a recycling stream from their household.
Justin, I think he gave a little bit of information.
So I can give you real numbers if you want me to send them. I too be getting reports from Ecomaine on our tonnage for everything that goes out. The problem with the recycle stream right now is the recycling costs more than trash because there's no market for it. So short of doing it for the reasons that you should do it, doesn't save the town money anymore.
So I just asked, talked to Gail this afternoon, if we get rid of that off the garbage. And she said the main problem is the cardboard. And that is, and if you go down to the Chandler Stove and see what comes in on the Castle Bay, it's incredible. Really.
It's that old saying, we've met the enemy and they are us, because we are the ones who are buying it. And Justin pointed out to me the other day, we were chatting, is that it's not just the cardboard, but inside the cardboard is the styrofoam and the bubble wrap and all that stuff that's also going into the waste stream. Phyllis?
I'm impressed in a short period of time when I was at the meeting here by myself a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about solid waste, the steps that you've taken, Justin already, and I think getting a consultant is a really great idea. Have we thought about like a public education or communication component of it? Because I think there's things that we can do at home to manage ourselves and what we're sending over there, that it was more front and center to us. And even, I think people are struggling with what goes in recycling and what goes in trash, what should go over in the building materials. There's a lot of people that I don't think really know where the stuff should go. So I would say if you could get more visible with your communication out to the community and help us figure out where it goes, and then we'll manage it better at our end. And I think we can change our buying habits a bit too.
Also, I think that Justin had talked about Ecomaine. When we first went with Ecomaine, they did a really good public relations, and they're really into public education. So I think that would be
That would be very helpful. Put it on a refrigerator, where things go, manage
some
ourselves.
things change too, because, what they will take and what they won't. Bo, Beverly, and Mary.
I think we also need to set a workshop.
a workshop for the,
To talk about policy, maybe.
Solid waste?
Solid waste,
Okay.
solutions or something.
I'll add that to,
Or do we wait till the consultant comes through?
let's talk about that when we get to other business. Yeah,
Well, I mean, we're talking about the dumper now.
right, no, yeah. No, I meant about, do we want to put it on, on which agenda do we want to do it?
Well, I'm just wondering if the consensus would be if we do a workshop now to talk about it, or do we wait till we get the report from?
I would ask Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I have a packet of information that Marjorie had put together before COVID of fees and things that she wanted to change that then just kind of got tabled when, everybody rolled stuff. I don't know if you want to take those up or if you want to wait until we have somebody sort of look at it holistically and give us.
How long does it take them to do this holistic look? Because if something happens, we have to have a special town meeting or an election or something like that. That was going to take, so an ordinance, there were a few things that we had to change in the ordinance just to clarify. For example, it's not clear, on the definition of recycling materials, that actually the intent was that whoever is our provider would actually take those as recyclables. And what's happened is we're getting, what is theoretically recyclable really isn't recyclable. So there's some definitions that need to change in that ordinance as well. So how long do you think this?
I'm still, I sent 2 or 3 emails to Tony today, trying to narrow down the scope, and trying to figure out exactly what we're asking for, because there's a certain amount of services that we get for free from GP-cog, they consider them, they fall in their general services, and then if you request stuff outside of that, that's not an normal thing, they charge an incremental fee, so the other towns
Oh,
are
so
paying
he's
for our work.
figuring it out.
So we're trying to narrow down
Okay.
what it's
I
gonna be.
would suggest, Connor, if I may, that we wait until these people do the evaluation and report on our facility and our operation, and then consider a workshop and move this along tonight.
Okay. Is that, you okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. There were 2 people out in the audience, who had their hands up. Mary? Beverly, were you the other one?
Yeah,
Mary's first and then you're second.
just in terms of potential long-term solutions, I know you said that our solid waste committee hasn't met. I know years ago with one of our earlier town administrators, who talked about having a glass crusher so that we can actually utilize the crushed glass right here on Shindig in our cold pack as we repave roads. And now there are all different size smoke-free incinerators that can reduce waste up to 99%. And rather than moving our trash around, perhaps a long-term plan to be able to manage some of our trash right here on Shindig and utilize it. I know military bases have incinerators that produce energy. We're a tiny town, but we're spending a lot of money on moving our waste around. We're making more waste all the time. I'm guilty. I do a lot of online food shopping, and we need to have a plan.
So Justin can get that sentiment as part of what he's looking at too. Beverly?
I was just gonna say, I got a box this big today, with 3 little boxes of Band-Aids. And I'm just appalled. I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. What can we do to not get our stuff this way? I know Amazon, the suggestion is when you do an Amazon, do one big order and you have to come in 1 box. And they'll ask you, do you want it in 1 box or, it's gonna take 3 weeks. It's crazy. It's making me sick to see what comes in these boxes.
Carol?
Yeah, I mean, the state just passed legislation that, these, particularly the large retailers have to pay the recycling costs for packaging. So, I mean, we should take that into account because there's gonna be an incentive for them to reduce the recyclable packaging. I mean, I guess what I don't understand is they transport issue this summer, or is it evolving?
I think it's a combination. From what I think that's what Justin was saying at the beginning, it's from all directions. They don't have enough workers to be able to run enough barges. They don't have enough workers to drive the trucks. It's the coordination, and we have way more trash. So, it's coming out from all directions. Okay, no one else has anything to say about trash. Let's move on to communications. I had an email from Kim Dean, who was concerned about attractive nuisances and septic systems that were failing, and I told him to contact the code enforcement officer. And he sent me a copy of the letter he wrote to him. So I have that. We got something in our packet about the Cumberland County Finance meeting that if anyone's interested in attending, you have it in your packet. I had many calls and conversations about the signs and dumps. Anybody else have any communication? So,
I don't have a communication, but can I ask next time, because I don't get any of those communications. So if you get a communication, you can forward it or put it in the packet for.
yeah, actually, I printed off Kim Dean's, I'll give you a copy.
I had some communications about the street signs, but I'm not.
Yeah, I have a lot of communication. I think you would want to have to read it all, but, oh, here it is.
Don, if you share it with me, I'll share it with the rest.
Okay.
No, have that.
I'll just read them. Yeah, just do it. Okay, so, anyone else? Jen or Jay, have anything, anybody contact you about anything? Okay. Okay. All right, so, no more communication. Justin, do you have anything you wanted to bring to our attention? Okay, so Mayor, we need a motion to approve the minutes of June 16th, 2021.
So move.
Anyone have any comments? Yes.
Jay was saying that you emailed us out to us. I didn't get. And, so I'll just abstain from that.
I'll check my address for you. You get the email about the packet?
Yes.
Maybe it was in the beginning, maybe it came before the fact. You know, maybe.
I may have had it incorrect. It did have your name at one point without, missing a letter, so it probably was that. So it's been fixed.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, so the real motion.
Voting.
We've already
Oh,
made it and seconded, sorry.
all in favor? All right, opposed, abstention. Abstention. Okay, and let's, on other business, one of the things Justin and I talked about is instead of having other business that we actually call it future agendas. So what are some things that we need to come up with? So these are just a list of, number one is we need to make appointments for committees. It's our responsibility to appoint people to the committees. And so we need to make a list. Usually that's the first meeting in July. And so I would assume the next meeting, we could just have a list of all those people. And we have some new applications I know that we need to look at. And so everybody okay with having that on the next agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, the next event is next week.
Well, that's the other
That's
question.
the other question.
No, never mind.
Okay.
All right.
Um,
Oh, June.
no,
False. Never mind.
so also on the next agenda would be about whether or not we're gonna buy a new truck. Is that the case?
And whether you want, and the other one would be the engineering design for Stonewall Road.
Right, engineering design, we have actually, I don't know if Justin sent that out yet,
I did.
Yeah. About the engineering study for the road, at the Wharf Road and expanding it. So the question is, do we want to meet next Wednesday, or do we want to put this off to the beginning of, August, where, what would be the date for that first meeting in August?
Well, to the 28th of July.
Yeah, that was my question.
Well, our regular meeting would be next week.
I'd say that-
See, this meeting is out of order.
The first meeting would be August 4th.
Okay.
Let's just do next week.
So we meet next week, okay. All right, then we'll be back in our regular schedule.
So we're gonna meet on 21st.
I think we need to put, signs on that also.
So the question is, do we want to have a workshop on signs as part of that meeting?
I think we need to, my opinion, yes. I'm wondering also if it's state required or federally required or whatever, that we need to have signs. Not only road signs, but actual numbers on our houses, which I'm guilty of, I don't mind it. But I'm 10 miles up the road, so, just think.
Mark?
I'm just wondering if we're ready to talk about a different way to possibly consider street sign. I don't think it's rocket science, but I think we heard from at least a couple of residents tonight that if we're going to consider putting up any street signs or putting back street signs, if you will, what are they gonna look like?
I think that this has several different tentacles. I mean, one is, do we want to have street signs? The second is, as you said, what would they look like? Would we do all the streets? I mean, these are, I mean, it's kind of a list to check off. And really the question is, do we want to have more time to think about it, or do we want to do it at our meeting next week?
Yeah, and I'll be careful with my comment. I think putting up signs on this island or in this community is a shock to some people. I think it's a culture change for them. I think it's they see it as a mainland look, if you will. And so, those are mostly the comments and some of my own observations and possibly feelings. And I'm not thrilled to continue to spend money on signage that gets ripped down. I know that's always a risk. I realize that's always a risk, whether it's a factory stop sign or an incorrect six-sided sign. I realize that's a risk, but I don't want to keep just putting them up, they yank them down, throw them overboard. Putting them up, it's just, so I'm gonna want to think about that myself. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm against everything, but I'm a little cautious with looking at this.
Well, I guess my feeling is that any kind of change like this needed to have education, there needed to be discussion ahead of time. Anything we do in the future needs to have that kind of education so that you have an opportunity to get buy-in. I do have a major concern in this community that people think it's okay. It's just boys being boys, girls being girls, whatever. And that there were numerous encouragements on social media of people saying, well, it's only a matter of time, we've always done it, we've always ripped things down. Well, that doesn't make it right. And that is, we had that problem at Chandler's Cove. It took years to get that turned around. And to me, the bigger issue here is how do we respect public property and how do we respect the law as much as do we have signs? I mean, that changed the whole discussion and made it much more complicated.
But I like your suggestions about changing other business to future agenda items, because I don't think we should be talking about even signs or any type of business that isn't advertised on there as an agenda item to be discussed. I think that's fast track.
we're talking about is, do we want to have a workshop? Do we want the workshop next week on signs, or do we want to get more information? Yeah.
So do you think by next week you'd be able to get some information, either the template of the sign, what the state required us to get, or 911 required us to get, or something, or code, I don't know. Who rules it, but you know, that would be adequate time for you to bring to us as a workshop to talk about, or would you rather postpone it till
I could answer all the questions now. If anybody wants, you know what they want. I won't do it because it's not on the agenda, but yes, if you were so inclined to talk about it next meeting, that's fine.
I'm looking at a workshop with a limited time to talk about this
Okay, we're gonna, Jen and Jay,
next week.
I had a bunch of people that, most everybody I talked to or talked to me about it was laughing about it. So, you know, and a couple of people that need to find a way around the island for business, thought that signs were a good idea. Just so, but I think we're gonna have a workshop, so if there are certain state requirements for signs as to the size, so forth, that's one issue. I don't think the concept of having people have decorative signs, where they feel like putting up decorative signs, makes any sense. I think it should be more standardized. But we should have, I mean, if we need to, we should have a public conversation about it. And whether it's next week or 3 weeks from now.
Jen,
I'm fine with doing it
next week,
next week. That's,
about a half an hour, does that sound reasonable?
well, it all depends on how many.
People show up, I know, because we don't want to shut somebody
I'm
down.
sorry, but I wish I had that much time on my hands to worry about street signs and how they look, because it's a street sign, people.
One of the things that I found was very interesting, because I had a lot of people contact me, and I was surprised at how many positive responses I got from people who grew up here, who I would have thought would have been the first people to say, I think it's stupid. You know what I mean? I was really surprised at, and somebody accused me of going out and finding people who would agree with me, and I had no opinion actually, because I didn't even know where to get signed.
It's really helpful that when you go to explain the
You know,
1,500 people that come down and want to know how to get back to the boat, well, you go left. and
Well, see,
what's
you're
the
kind of in the
difference?
same situation I'm in, like at the museum. We pass out free maps because it's, but anyway. All right, so by consensus,
Mark,
oh yeah. So basically, while you were gone, everybody said they just wanted to put a half an hour into a workshop next week.
That's fine.
Okay. Jackie, so,
I would like to ask a simple question. Is there a state requirement for street signs?
There is no. If you put them up, they're supposed to work a certain way. So the federal government passed the manual on traffic control standards back in the 1950s. That's why we all have octagon red stop signs everywhere. And then in the 1970s, Maine adopted those standards. So there's a manual which says the font type is supposed to be, the color, the size, all that's on there. The traffic control mechanisms, stop signs, yields, things like that, and the municipal officers decide where those get put. Anything that has to do with anything else is generally the discretion of the road commissioner, so that's the major, there's your answers for your workshop.
So when you have workshop, we can find out on the workshop. Do we do it at 5:30? Do you throw it?
no, I think we should just start at 6 and just do it at the beginning. We don't have that much, I mean, if we're talking about buying a new truck and engineering stone wall, and making the appointments, I mean, that's all kind of boilerplate. I kind of, well, you never know. Like you said, you never know who's gonna show up.
Typically, you obviously can do whatever you want, but typically you would leave your normal meeting time, start at 6, because people are accustomed to that. You would have your workshop ahead of that, and then there's a hard stop date. If there's a hard stop time of workshop, because when your meeting starts, you have to go into your meeting. You can't let a workshop run 3 hours over your normal start date. So if you want to have it start at 6, it has to say on the agenda, it'll say workshop.
And
And
the
then
meeting
6:30,
starts at
because then you
6:30.
go into
Right.
your selectman officer hat, so you have to have a time to.
Because I know people work and 5:30 is kind of tough for people to get here. And so we would start this, the regular meetings.
Picking up the fancy little street sign samples like you see in some of the point.
No, I think it's ridiculous.
I think it's really, so that, this is what they're.
Yeah, I'll
requiring.
get some samples.
So I think, yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
What?
To see the sign.
Oh, to have
The
samples?
font, and, yeah.
No, I was kidding.
No, I think it would be helpful. This is what they're requiring us to have.
Oh, I see. Oh, I thought you, oh, okay. I thought you meant,
No, I know.
I need to have Dudley
Can I
sign.
move that we adjourn?
Yeah, sorry. Anyone else have any other business? All right, seeing none, is there a second to
I'll
Jake?
second that.
All in favor?
Thank you.
No, thank you for putting up with the meeting tonight. Are you gonna start?
Oh, Mary, there is still one other